speak. And entropy doesn't affect living systems. It does dead systems, so to speak, like robots and so on. So they thought, hang on a minute, how about hitching into something like the mechanisms these living beings happen to have, and let's then see, by merging ourselves with that, if we can get a kind of eternity, so to speak. You understand? Yeah. Big deal, this is the big deal. Maybe this is what they were trying to do. And this is what they are trying to do. And maybe this is what explains his abductions and all the rest of it. And then also, it alludes to why Jesus Christ came here and tried to tell us, hang on a minute, be careful, this may be the thing that all of you have to watch in the future, and maybe 2012 signs a point at which things will be done on this earth that may in fact not allow us to retain our naturalness, that sin-card man-ness, so to speak, in quotes, may be going so far as to threaten the natural aspect of our living nature as beings, living beings with free will, by the insertion, shall we say, they're doing it now, of various, mechanisms into us, ostensibly to cure diseases, whatever. But hang on a minute, supposing it can also marshal our thinking, it can also stop us being us, so to speak, with the freedom to think and do with imagination and so on. And so here we are. I believe that Jesus came 2,000 years ago to warn us, this is in the process, watch for artificial beings, watch for robots and so on with artificial intelligence, and you guys have your ability to keep on living by coming back or whatever through birth, if these guys put inside you their own program for their reasons, if you see what I mean. That's another big deal, Lance.
Well, that's a pretty startling thought.
In fact, if I may add here, I think that this is probably one of the most dangerous things we face in these times. You know, I think that because we are living beings, as Nigel has just sort of tentatively outlined, if we die, we get killed by a spear or a rock or an asteroid, we can still come back again. We still have the free will available to us to actually observe everything from the point of view that we wish to. Yeah. The problem is that as we slowly give away our ability to do that by lending our will to technology, essentially we give them effectively our free will, and therefore we can't actually retain that freedom when we die to come back again, because we're hitched into a more technological framework to do it.
That's right.
And I think that's really scary. Now, the point about Jesus is that he came to save us, and he said all of this 2,000 years ago. But really, I think what Nigel's book ends up with is really discussing a gift for us for now, if you see what I mean, in that we now require the technology, and he's actually sort of left us this gift of a shroud, if you like, his body covering, which in fact we're now looking at with more technology, and I think we'll discuss that more in a minute. Which is actually, actually gives us then, if we understand what that really means, the mechanism by which we can actually get past what these grey aliens are doing, so that we can actually retain our ability to continue to know and to be who we are.
Yeah, and that's the crucial thing, Lance. The crucial thing is to retain the power of our will in our own terms of reference as individuals. And I'll give you a little story, maybe, and that actually demonstrates this beautifully that comes from the New Testament. You know that if you recall, and I don't know how much Christianity you are familiar with, but there is a reference in the Gospels, I think that it's in Matthew and in Luke, where this individual, Jesus Christ, was seconded by this being, this individual. They call this being Satan, and this Satan character seemed to have control of the planet because he was offering Jesus all kinds of things, the entire planet, if he worshipped him, in so many words and so on. I think this actually there's a biblical reference to this. I'll try and find it for you. I think it's in Luke chapter 4, verse 8, you know,
Okay.
and it says there, that this individual, Jesus Christ, said to this character, Satan, "Get thee behind me, Satan, for it is written, thou shalt worship the Lord thy God, and him only shalt thou serve." Now, inasmuch as that is so, there seems to be a battle of authority here, where this individual, Jesus, is saying to Satan, "Look, it's the other way round, Buster. You can't give me anything. It is you who have to follow me." That might imply that Satan might have been a robot or a roboid or something, even though he might have all the technology in the world to take Jesus where he wanted to. He was being put in his place by Jesus. Now, the interesting thing is, in the same description, this chap is taken to a high place. And from this high place, you're supposed to see the cities of the world. Now, I looked at this and I thought, this is really fascinating, because there is no church, there is no mountain, there is no building 2,000 years ago high enough to see anything but a surrounding area perhaps of 6, 10, 15 kilometers. Where is it that you could see the cities of the world? If you look at a map of Judea in terms of a two-dimensional flat, plane, so to speak, and if you look at the whole of the known world at the time, actually it fits in a nice square with Judea right in the center. Now, where do you think that you can see all the cities of the world from if you were in Judea? Go 200 miles up into space, and you will see the cities of the world. And I think, therefore, the connection between these alien beings, robots or not, roboids I think they are, that is the connection between Christ and the roboids that gives us some verity in looking at this whole linking system between all the things that I'm saying. That here we are, here's a link that puts Christ right in with perhaps alien beings. Because, the word Satan, for instance, in ancient mythology, translates out as he who fell from the sky. And there's another hint for you, that something's going on here. Something's wrong in the state of Denmark, so to speak, from Hamlet, If you see what I mean.
Of course.
And you can see how this is getting really exciting now, And I'm looking at all of this as I uncover this business in my research and so on, and I think, hey, perhaps this is what it's all about. These guys are all in some kind of conspiracy to capture in some kind of way an entire species, and we are lab rats. And then I go back in time and look at the history of man, and I find, that ancestral line of our species, so to speak, and what do I find? That suddenly, magically, about 200,000 years ago, or maybe less than that, they're not quite sure about this, that our species, the female of the species, develops a pelvis that is huge, that can admit a sudden growth of brain size when previously we were kind of primitive monkey-type hominids or whatever, such that it could admit a huge brain. And maybe out of this, Neanderthals began. Neanderthals, have a larger brain than Homo sapiens sapiens. That's us, modern man. Now, something happened that was incredible there to suddenly make this jump, this capacity within the biology of humanity to produce this incredible size, when for 3 million years previously nothing like that happened. Now, that's a crazy thing, And so, therefore, I'll just finish this point. And that particular mechanism that produced this particular size differential and perhaps intelligence differential and so on, may be the most incredible thing of all. That we then came from this as thinking beings of high sophistication and so on, and that can only be done through genetic engineering. And this is where I think the interception of a higher intelligence coming here, past equals MC squared and all of that to our planet, might actually point to the guilty parties. Those things we see now in flying saucers that, your astronauts verify. Your press club recently had some distinguished people saying they are here. There can be no doubt about it, Lance. Something terrifying is going on, and it's been covered up And this has been hidden from the body politic of humankind, and that is the business of ordinary people who think outside the box to get in there and expose somehow. I go at that line.
I totally agree with you. And there are many people right now making a case for the idea that, such as Sitchin, who just passed, and Michael Tellinger, who's leaned heavily on the work of Sitchin, that about 200,000 years ago, the Anunnaki cloned us from the ape-like beings that were here in order to do labor. And there's a mounting evidence that we were cloned for that purpose. And that our DNA was limited.
I'm not so sure, in my own terms, can I say that here? I'm not so sure that an intelligence that could come here in that scale of magnitude would want to clone us, to make us simply laborers. I think their technology would be so huge that they wouldn't need laborers to harvest gold or whatever. I think they could get this to happen no problem at all in their own way. I think maybe that was our kind of terrestrial thinking mess, so to speak, that might, this is the kind of thing we would do. We'd make an army of ants or whatever it is to get this, that, or the other. I think they are here for something far more precious than gold and things like that. They are here for our capacity, our human capacity, to come back as often as we want, to actually beat the second law of thermodynamics, which rots everything. And I think when they discovered there's a simple living species here that can do this, that can have birth happen to them, these machines wanted to know how this was done. And being machines with a program, of course, they have no sense of individuality. A program, something like your vacuum cleaner, doesn't know itself of itself as a vacuum cleaner. But these are
supposed to be highly intelligent, and in fact, many people say that they have advanced skills, telepathy, and the ability to change form and to move people, human beings, through walls, and to appear as light beings, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, the technology can actually do things with atoms. We can think as human beings. We have a sense that goes beyond the atom. In order to come back in birth, there must be something that continues. If we accept a factorization like a soul, we have to think outside the physical methodology of an atom as such. We have to go beyond that. And I think that the great religious teachers, in the world were trying to tell us there's an added dimension to natural living things, something wondrous, that we might in fact end, if we are careless about it, to our own volition. To our own volition, not something else outside that's a machine coming and doing it to us, but we ourselves, by not using it judiciously or understanding its propensity, if we did this, we might in fact end ourselves. But what they are trying to do is to try to impose on us a regime that serves their purpose. In fact, we are lab rats to them, and because their technological advancement is so superior to our thinking potential, at least at that time, they have the ascendancy there. But as they did this, and our brain capacity rose, the realization returned to us from this primitive monkey species, returned to us, my goodness me, these things are here in time. It occurred to us, these things are here to actually take our propensity, our free will over. And then, of course, what was in the universe before, great being, soul, if you like, returned to our planet through the mechanism that perhaps Jesus did and so on. And through the shroud, and what we find in the shroud, and this is crucial. I was at Frascati, and Dr. Andrew Silverman, a medical doctor, friend of mine, delivered a dissertation about a book I'd written, and some theory I had about, what the shroud might well be, and he had his own take on this, and he gave a fantastic dissertation about this that actually riveted all the top scientists in the world sitting there, researching the shroud, and said some things about it that were absolutely incredible.